Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Defending Life podcast, brought to you by the Quad-Parishes of Green Bay. I'm your host, Joseph, and I'll be your guide as we explore the topic of life. Now, as a disclaimer, we at the Quad-Parishes, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and thus we do not endorse any candidates. We do not offer recommendations of any candidate for any political office, whether it be senatorial, presidential, congressional, local, etc. We only share church teachings on social issues. Now, my topic today, admittedly, it's not at all in the order that I wanted to present this in. This was going to be one I was going to get to a bit later down the road, but I felt that it's very important for anyone listening who is a Catholic or even a Christian. Much of this applies to, and what our duty, what our obligation is when voting. Because from writings such as the Didache to Pope John Paul the Great, all have maintained that the Bible forbids abortion as much as it forbids murder. And Pope St. John Paul II, he even said that not even a murderer loses his personal dignity, and God himself pledges to guarantee this. So again, as I talked about in my first episode, all persons are equal. And we showed that an embryo, a fetus, is biologically a person, a human person. Now, I will say, some do claim that the Bible is just silent, completely silent on abortion. And, I mean, you don't even have to be a biblical scholar to show otherwise, because there are verses such as Psalm chapter 127 verse 3. It says, "Certainly sons are a gift from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward." Well, if an embryo were not a gift, then you could claim that yes, Bible is silent. However, a gift from God is a new life, and as Christians, we definitely do not want to throw such a gift away. And on top of that, why would, for example, God condemn the Ammonites for ripping open pregnant women in Gilead in the first chapter of the book of Amos? If it wasn't an issue, I suppose the pregnant women were hurt, yes, but he would completely condemn them? I'm not sure about that. Now, in the Old Testament, the law of Moses, it gave strict penalties for causing an abortion. And we read and this is from the book of Exodus, chapter 21. "If men who are fighting hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, if there's no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot." And some say that, if they hear this verse used, they'll say, well, it actually just means miscarriage. Since only a fine is given, they say that an unborn baby was only considered a potential life and didn't carry the same legal status as a baby that had been born. But in other places like Genesis 31, Exodus 23, and Job chapter 2, we see the Hebrew word for miscarry, which is shachol. So shachol, meaning miscarry, it's not used in this passage. When it says, hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, it does not, it doesn't use any word for miscarry. And most scholars do agree that verse 22 here, it refers to a premature birth, and no, not a miscarriage. In addition, Saint Jerome, in his biblical commentary on this verse, he notes that there was something called the lex talionis, or the law of retribution, and it first appears in regard to the child that has been killed. Because the lex talionis, this law of retribution, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, etc., it would have already applied to the pregnant woman. So this verse actually applies this law of retribution to the child that was still in the womb. Now, another thing we can see in the Old Testament, in Job chapter 3 verse 3, the prophet, he bemoans both the moments he was born and the moment he was conceived. He says, "Perish the day on which I was born, the night when they said, the child is a boy." Now, it seems in our English interpretation, well, perish the day on which I was born, in addition to the night when they said the child is a boy. Two separate events. So child is a boy, being the birth. But the passage uses something called synonymous parallelism, in which the second line restates the first to say the same thing in a different way. And we see that this parallel, it suggests that the born child and the conceived child are considered as equal, as the same. And actually, in fact, the terms Yaled and Chara are used interchangeably here, showing that a person exists both at conception and at birth. So even the Bible establishes personhood at conception. Now, look into the New Testament. Well, we can see that a baby was not seen as being, I'll say, linguistically different, whether in the womb or otherwise. When Elizabeth, when she speaks of the child in her womb in Luke chapter 1, she refers to the fetus of John the Baptist as brephos, which it's also used to refer to born infants. So the word brephos was synonymous with both, it was used for both a born infant and one that has not yet been brought forth, that has not yet been born. Now, some will argue, and I see this at times, that when Jesus said to let the little children come to me, he used the word paideia, meaning literally small children, and thus, didn't even regard infants. Yes, this is true. Paideia, it was used to refer to very small children, and again, at the time, he was referring to the environmental setting he was in when he was speaking of the children around him. However, this entire argument, it's what's called an argument from silence, because it implies that since Christ did not speak of killing babies in the womb, he therefore allowed it or saw no issue with it. However, he never spoke about dating. He never said anything about voting, and he never explicitly said anything about rape or sexual abuse. Why is that? Well, again, we have to use what's called a historical hermeneutic. So we have to look at the historical context of of the New Testament, because his audience was made of first century Galilean Jews, and they were unanimously against evils such as abortion, such as rape, such as sexual abuse. So if you were to say, don't do this, and they weren't doing it, well, then he'd just be wasting his breath, wouldn't he? And Jesus didn't do that. At the same time, because he said, why didn't he mention dating or voting? But again, contextually, first century Galilean Jews, they didn't date because they had arranged marriages, and they didn't have elections wherein they would vote. But, all that aside, a Christian cannot honestly say that the words of Christ are more inspired than the rest of the Bible. Of course, it's the Word of God, capital W, Word of God, pronouncing words of God. But one is not lesser than or greater than another, if we are to claim that the Bible is the inspired Word of God. And if many other parts of the Bible, if they speak of the evil of destroying innocent lives, as just a couple examples that I showed, then those must also be true. Unless, of course, fulfilled by the salvific power of Jesus, but that's a separate thing. Now, a final and kind of classic verse that I want to kind of point to, it's in Psalm chapter 139. You formed my inmost being. You knit me in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My very self you know. My bones are not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, fashioned in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw me unformed. In your book all are written down. My days were shaped before one came to be. So you see a lot of beauty there when David is praising God for the blessing, the gift of being conceived, being created. Anyway, I want to move on a little bit. So one text that I like to look to sometimes with a discerning grain of salt. It's called the Didache, or the Lord's teaching through the 12 apostles to the nations. And it was drafted between about the years 50 and 80, so between there. And it explained ideas such as the very real sacrifice of the Eucharist, being able to baptize either by pouring water or immersing a person, etc. But it also explores some forbidden sins. And taking from both the J.B. Lightfoot and the Roberts translation here, we read, "You shall not commit murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not seduce boys, you shall not commit fornication, you shall not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that which is born." So, not too long after the death of Christ, and abortion was being specifically referred to, and we see other what could be considered apocryphal texts speaking of abortion explicitly as well. But another person I want to look to is Tertullian. Now Tertullian, but he was called by Saint Jerome, he was called a presbyter, or a priest in the Roman Catholic Church. A presbyter, the first Latin writer after Victor and Apollonius. And he came from Carthage, which is modern-day Tunisia in Africa. Unfortunately, Tertullian, he did become an apostate. He joined a group called the Montanists. They're basically modern-day Pentecostals, you could say. The Montanists, after discovering what he called the New Prophecy. But nonetheless, he's considered a great Latin father of the Church. And he left with us many great writings. And one of these, called the Treatise on the Soul, or De Anima, it looks at early abortions. And now, if you're faint of heart, you might want to skip ahead, because it's quite graphic. But he writes, "Accordingly, among surgeons' tools, there is a certain instrument which is formed with a nicely adjusted flexible frame for opening the uterus and keeping it open. It is further furnished with an annular blade, by means of which the limbs within the womb are dissected with anxious but unfaltering care, its last appendage being a blunted or covered hook, wherewith the entire fetus is extracted by a violent delivery. He also goes on to write, there is also a copper needle or spike by which the actual death is managed in this furtive or secret robbery of life. They give it, from its infanticide function, the name of Emperos Factis, the slayer of the infant, which was, of course, alive. Tertullian, he lists several doctors of his time, and then he says that they all knew well enough that a living being had been conceived, and pitied this most luckless infant state, which had first to be put to death to escape being tortured alive. And then 2 chapters later he writes, we admit that life begins with conception, because we contend that the soul also begins from conception, life taking its commencement at the same moment and place that the soul does. And as I said in my first episode, the Catechism of the Catholic Church fully agrees with that statement and with that position. Now, another quote from Pope St. John Paul the Great, II. He teaches that, the Church's teaching on abortion, he says, is unchanged and unchangeable. Therefore, by the authority which Christ conferred upon Peter and his successors, I declare that direct abortion, that is, abortion willed as an end or as a means, always constitutes a grave moral disorder, since it is the deliberate killing of an innocent human being. This doctrine is based upon the natural law and upon the written word of God, is transmitted by the Church's tradition and taught by the ordinary and universal magisterium. No circumstance, no purpose, no law whatsoever can ever condone an act which is intrinsically forbidden, since it is contrary to the law of God, which is written in every human heart, knowable by reason itself and proclaimed by the Church. And he writes this in the 62nd section of his encyclical Evangelium Vitae. Now, let me back up. Why should we care about any of this at all as Catholics? And I mean, in relation to voting, well, because of the value of what's called the principle of reciprocity, also known, we know it as the golden rule. And this idea, it permeates almost all cultures, religious or otherwise, and it says that we should treat others as we would wish to be treated in the same circumstance. Now, despite obvious relative exceptions such as suicide, human lives, they universally act to sustain themselves. Because we act to preserve our own lives, reciprocity, this principle of reciprocity, golden rule, says it is wrong to take the lives of others. And I mean, it makes sense. We appreciate living, and therefore, not having been aborted, in turn should not take human life through abortion. And Dr. Don Marquis, he's a professor of philosophy, he pointed out that the evil of abortion, it simply lies in robbing the fetus of its future. But why am I talking about all this? I shouldn't be pushing my religion on you. But as Bishop Felipe Estevez of Florida said, it is not a matter of imposing a belief, but of being committed to the truth about human life, which, as biological science confirms, begins at conception. We cannot with integrity pray the words of the Our Father or say Amen when receiving the Eucharist, and then be passive on the issue that destroys God's creation. The Church will always act to promote dignity and value of every human life from conception to natural death. We care about both mothers and their children, born and unborn, as well as the poor, the immigrant, the sick, the disabled, the elderly, those who are marginalized, and those on death row. So, as he said, it's not imposing a belief. It's just imposing your value, your common sense value of human life. Now, on this topic, people, they love to use their version of the separation of church and state. And they say, well, the Constitution says that you can't be religious and be in politics. Not at all. The phrase, it's not even in the Constitution. It's a letter from Thomas Jefferson. He was writing to some Baptists at the time. But what does the Constitution say? Well, in the First Amendment, it simply says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So Congress will not establish a religion. And it says it'll do that, neither do that, nor prohibit the free exercise thereof. So in fact, it's actually more so not get your religion out of my government, it's get your government out of my religion in a way. So no, if someone says separation of church and state, you can just point out that, no, in fact, to say that someone who is religious should not have a political office, well, that's restricting their free speech and going against the Constitution, which they hold so dear. But so I bring this up because stop thinking that you can't live your life by your moral principles. For example, I would never vote for any politician, any candidate from any political party, any branch of government at all, who thought that a certain race or people with disabilities or something were not persons. I don't mean like thought lesser of. Of course, that's evil in itself, but if someone claimed that a certain race, they're just not even persons, I'm not going to vote for them. So I'm not going to go out and vote for someone in, the neo-Nazi party, if that is what they claim. So why would I vote for someone who says the unborn are not persons or are not deserving of life? As Catholics, if we want to remain in communion with the Church, we must protect those who cannot at all protect themselves. Now, because I'll be getting into, what the Church says that our obligation is. But before I do that, what about the root causes of abortion? Because what about candidates who support legal abortion, but, some people would say that they're actually more pro-life because they favor welfare programs that just reduce the abortion. So they want to help, they want to better society. Okay. And some people say that Catholics have a valid reason to vote for a pro-choice candidate if they think that their policies will reduce abortion by making it unnecessary instead of illegal. So addressing it as at a societal level. And, well, yes, this would almost be valid if pro-life advocates have made no progress on reducing the number of abortions annually. But since the 1980s, abortion rates have been in decline. And statistics show that abortion restrictions, not introducing more money into impoverished neighborhoods, but introducing and enacting restrictions on abortions, such as informed consent laws or waiting periods. Statistics show that these have led to reductions in abortion rates. However, at the same time, abortion is not something that we just have to reduce the severity of, but it's rather an evil that many women feel is their only option because, guess what? No one tells them otherwise. Now, I'm going to go through some statistics here to kind of, to look at just bear with me. So, although, taking over 61 million lives is never acceptable, we do have a duty as Catholic Christians to recognize that abortions exist out of a societal and cultural disorder. So yes, it exists because people have allowed it to exist. In 2019, guess what? 22% of pregnancies in the U.S. ended in abortion. 22. Almost a quarter of every pregnancy ended in abortion. Over 440 women have actually died from legal abortions in the U.S. since Roe v. Wade. Before that, though, less than 40 women died from illegal abortions, which people like to call back alley abortions. Plus, they were almost always done by a licensed doctor back then. And all right, so looking at a societal aspect, well, the referrals for adoptions at organizations such as Planned Parenthood, they've increasingly dropped up to 27% in just over a year. So adoptions, the referrals, they don't really do that much. And this means that 83 abortions were performed for every one adoption referral. So if you ever have someone who says to you, well, why aren't more people adopting? You could let them know, maybe because no one tells them that that's an option. And as one feminist leader said, we do not eliminate poverty by eliminating poor women's children. It is degrading to poor women to expect or imply that their children aren't welcome. I agree with that wholeheartedly. It is not empowering to women to say, that anything that they have produced, anything that they have accomplished, if, saying that childbirth is an accomplishment, something that they dealt with for 9 months, it's not empowering to say, no, that means nothing to us. Especially if someone's poor. So, anyway. So what are a couple effects? And these are, I'm just going over some quick ones. I'll be doing multiple other episodes that go into a lot more detail. But the Elliott Institute, it's in a peer-reviewed report, it noted that suicide rates are 6 times higher for women after an abortion. And 65% of women who have received one, they suffer from not just depression, not just a little anxiety or a little guilt, PTSD. PTSD that they must now be on medication for. And, alright, so, people will also say that an abortion it's women's health care. Well, tangent, health care applies if the opposite would make a woman unhealthy. So being pregnant doesn't make you sick. It doesn't mean that you're sick. And you can't say, well, what about the women who are going to die otherwise, because that is such a small statistic, but we'll get into that. But it's not health care, because it doesn't do anything for their health. And as we'll see, there's no care. Now, only 5% of abortions occur in hospitals. That's not healthcare. Over 90% occur in freestanding clinics, which aren't even required to be equipped for emergency care and don't require a doctor-patient relationship to be established. And all right, we'll go back to the empowering women thing. 79% of women, they're not told about other resources. Not even the adoption thing. They're not even told, well, here's where you can go for supplies. Nothing. 84% were not informed about the procedure itself. What it implies, what the effects will be, what it will do to their psyche, to their sanity. Now, the Declaration of Geneva, it was amended in 2017, and it says that all medical professionals will share their medical knowledge for the benefit of the patient and the advancement of healthcare. Well, 67% of women receive no counseling before an abortion. So are people at abortion facilities, are they truly medical professionals? The Declaration of Geneva would say no, not at all. And, if I were a woman, which I'm not, but I am a human being, here we go. As a human being, I want someone who is a medical professional, especially if they're saying they want to perform a type of surgery on me. Now, there's another issue, though. 64% of women, they reported feeling pressured to get an abortion. 64%. So, society, all of these, the issue is not that society can't afford. The issue is that society is telling them, there's no other option. You are stuck, and we're not even going to pay for this. We're going to leave you be. You figure this out, but you kill that child. And that's the issue. That is the issue in society. Because Planned Parenthood clinics, they're not required to screen for coercion. And that's not a woman's right. Women deserve much more. And feeling pressured to get an abortion, more than 50%, well, that's not a woman's choice then, is it? So I would say to society, stop taking away their choice, stop taking away their freedom, stop taking away their rights. But, another thing, side note again, each year in the U.S., 3 million women, they experience an unplanned pregnancy. And, you might think, so 10%, they're just using birth control or contraceptives that just failed. No, actually, half of that number, 1.5 million women who experience an unplanned pregnancy, they are using contraception or birth control methods. So, those don't work either. But I'll be doing a later episode on the hormonal and psychological effects of birth control. So keep an eye out for that one. So as I said, though, I'm thinking that society is the issue itself. And Pope Francis, our current Pope, he even noted that in our society, numerous contradictions are found that induce us to ask ourselves if the equal dignity of all human beings, solemnly proclaimed 70 years ago, is truly recognized, respected, protected, and promoted in every circumstance. So even the Pope is calling people out. As he should, saying, all right, you're going to say that that you respect all lives, that all lives are important to you? What about the millions that you don't see them, so out of sight, out of mind? The Pope's calling us out at that point. So obviously, though, there's nothing good about abortions. And any Catholic, any men at all listening, this part's for you. Because abortion, it's not just about a mother's choice, but it's also about your responsibility. And what we need a generation of just young men who honor women and protect the precious gift of their sexuality. A woman's body is given to her as a gift from God. It is her body. And men should never touch a woman in ways that she does not permit. In addition, men do not have the right to force a woman to use her body against her will. Her body is hers, and we must respect that. And the young men that need to step up, well, they have to step up to the plate if they get a woman pregnant. If that happens, it's your time to shine now. Because you must love each new life that you create. You must give up your own selfish desires and toxic personality traits, and you must now become a father and a caretaker. As one actor said, he said, "I think that children are the only true wealth that a man can give the world." You can give good movies, beautiful poetry, money, whatever you want. But I believe that giving a child is the most beautiful thing a man can do. And men, you need to recognize that. You need to see that, wow, look what you have done. You have created a life. As if you listen to my first episode, you saw you have created a life, a completely distinct, separate life. Wow. So don't use women, but love them just as God loves you. Now, another thing that I want to touch on, because I hear the claim that Christians, they only care about children once they are, or they only care about them when they're in the womb. Once they're born, we don't care anymore. Actually, no. A 2013 Barna Group study showed that 5%, doesn't seem like a lot, but 5% of practicing Christians in the U.S. have adopted, which is more than twice the number of other groups who have also adopted. So they're at the top. In addition, there's a 2009 survey. It showed that 38% of practicing Christians have at least seriously considered adoption, while only 26% of other groups had. And that's per the CDC. And in addition, there are more Catholic organizations that provide pregnancy and newborn resources than do secular organizations, non-religious organizations. And, you know, my fellow Catholics, of course, I take humble pride in this. You guys go above and beyond, because in 2018, 45% of all adoptions through Catholic charities, they were for newborns with special needs. So thank you. And Catholics, per another 2014 Barna study, they're actually 3 times more likely to adopt than a non-religious or non-practicing couple. So keep that up, please. I realize I'm kind of going all over the place with this, but I'm just following my thoughts. So some say, now on the topic of voting, some say that it doesn't matter who you vote for as long as you just use your conscience. They'll say, well, the church doesn't guide you specifically on which issues matter, so just use your best judgment. Well, Pope Francis, again, he states that we must all renew our commitment in favor of the defense of human dignity, with special attention to the most vulnerable members of the community. And he said that these vulnerable include the unborn who are denied the right to come to the world. So, but, what about this virtue of prudence? Why can't we just do whatever we want and just be prudent about it? Well, now the Catechism of the Catholic Church says that prudence is the virtue that disposes practical reason to discern our true good in every circumstance and to choose the right means of achieving it. With the help of this virtue, we apply moral principles to particular cases without error and overcome doubts about the good to achieve and the evil to avoid. So, just be prudent, make morally sound judgment. However, at the same time, this doesn't mean that judgment is up to each individual every time. So Catholics, you can't just do whatever you want just because you think that that you know best, or even that other people in political offices know best. Because a prudential judgment does not mean choosing a subjective preference. And now, in a future episode, I'll go into, I'll probably cover evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, and probably evolutionary ethics to show that objective morality must, by necessity, by biological necessity, exist. But for now, Let's bear with me on this. So the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, they note that prudential judgment is needed when applying moral principles to specific policy choices in areas such as armed conflict, housing, healthcare, immigration, and others. This does not mean that all choices are equally valid, or that our guidance and that of other church leaders is just another political opinion or policy preference among many others. The judgments and recommendations that we make as bishops on such specific issues do not carry the same moral authority as statements of universal moral teachings. So they note that, but nevertheless, the Church's guidance on these matters is an essential resource for Catholics, as they determine whether their own moral judgments are consistent with the gospel and with Catholic teaching. So, yes, we must bring our faith into the voting booth. And we must, and at the same time, we must promote the common good, but as our church teaches, not every issue is equal. And that's the crux of this entire episode, because some issues are more preeminent than others, and the right to life is called the most preeminent issue of all. To explore this, I want to look at a statement from Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. He became Pope Benedict the 16th, so our former Pope Emeritus. He said, and now don't worry about definitions yet, just bear with me. A Catholic would be guilty of formal cooperation in evil, and so unworthy to present himself for Holy Communion if he were to deliberately vote for a candidate precisely because of the candidate's permissive stand on abortion and or euthanasia. When a Catholic does not share a candidate's stand in favor of abortion and or euthanasia, but votes for that candidate for other reasons, it is considered remote material cooperation in evil, which can be permitted in the presence of proportionate reasons. This caused a lot of uproar. Some people thought, well, the Pope is just saying abortion's okay. And, the other side was saying, cool, the Pope is saying abortions are okay, if you have proportionate reasons. But, first, though, he mentions different types of cooperation. What do these mean? So sometimes our actions may be innocent, yet they may be a part of like a chain of events that creates or results in evil. So you might be crossing the street one day, and maybe you accidentally drop a quarter on the ground, okay? And then let's say a day later, a man is crossing the street, he sees that quarter, goes to pick it up, gets hit by a car. Obviously, you were very far removed from that evil event, evil, being his death. So clearly some forms of cooperation with evil in some circumstances are not sinful. So ignorance, it can be considered somewhat acceptable usually when combined with other reasons. Another reason could be, force, such as like being told to give a bank robber some money. Because a life is not worth money. So, this is, we do have to admit then the idea that we must never cooperate when evil may result, it doesn't work. Because let's say we wanted to, the guy picking up the quarter, let's say we saw this happening and we wanted to warn this guy who's about to get hit by a car. Well, if we warn him and he's, he survives, well, he'll just go on and he'll sin one day. And, so we'll allow him to survive and allow him, in a way, to sin. But God expects us to save him if we can. So we can't just withdraw from society and avoid evil in every possible aspect, because then we trade perceived sins of commission for actual sins of omission. So commission, perceived sins of commission, perceived sins of, maybe in a way allowing something. So we trade those for actual sins of not doing anything, and thus creating more evil because we're not able to prevent. But The question, it's not if we should cooperate with others, but what kinds of cooperation with others are morally legitimate. Not to worry, because the Catholic Church has discerned several forms of cooperation. The first is formal cooperation, it's called. And this happens when we knowingly agree with the act that we are committing. For example, if someone is robbing a bank and we decide to help him because we want to, because we want to, my inflection was odd there. We decide to help him because we want to, not because we're forced to. So we help the bank robber just because, we're formally cooperating in that evil. And Pope Benedict XVI, he regards voting, it regards voting for a candidate precisely because of the candidate's permissive stand on abortion and or euthanasia. So, if you do vote for someone because of their view on abortion, then you are endorsing them and you are formally cooperating with abortion or euthanasia and are therefore no longer in communion with the church. However, if you don't formally cooperate with evil, it's considered materially cooperating. So this happens when there's an action that it's not sinful in and of itself, but and you also don't endorse the evil that your action will inevitably potentially cause. So if you do something and, for example, let's say that you're a security guard at a bank and you unlock the doors one morning for a man because he's waiting outside in the cold. So that action, you unlock the door, that's not sinful. But the guy comes in, he knocks you out, and he robs the place. Your action of unlocking the door was not immoral, was not sinful. The cooperation in that case was material and not formal. Because again, you are not knowingly condoning that which has occurred. Now let's break it down even further. So there are types of material cooperation. There's remote and proximate. Now, in the case of opening a door for a bank robber, you unlocked the door that allowed the robber to commit this evil act. Thus, your material involvement was proximate or near to, the commission or allowance of that evil act. Because you were right there, you unlocked the door, and then evil occurred in that bank. But now let's say that you're the spouse of the bank security guard. Let's say you wanted your spouse to stay home from work today to help with the kids, but you let him go anyway. And then this robbery occurs. Well, while your actions were part of a chain of events leading to an evil act, they were very, very much removed from the robbery, and thus those would be described as remote material cooperation. Because you had no idea that any evil could come of your action of saying to your spouse, go to work, that's fine. So thus we can't refuse to take any action just because some evil may come of that action. Because even the smallest things, we can't see, this butterfly effect of what may or may not happen. And because we have to live our lives, we have to take action, regardless of any remote material cooperation. And this is called a proportionate reason. Now, I do want to note, this is different from what's called proportionalism. And in the 1960s, proportionalism, it was an attempt to basically legalize natural law, so moral universal law. However, it says that we can determine the right course of action by comparing the good and the necessary evil caused by the action. So we can compare them. However, it says that if good outweighs evil, The act is considered morally right, even though evil may have been done. And Pope John Paul II, he condemns this in his encyclical Veritatis Splendor. Says, "It is often claimed that the life of an unborn child or a seriously disabled person is only a relative good. According to a proportionalist approach, this good should be compared with and balanced against other goods." So, in an extreme proportionalist view, someone could say, two people, may die. One is fully healthy, one is seriously disabled. I will make sure that, we'll get rid of the seriously disabled person, and then I don't have to worry because I did the right thing. Of course, it may be forced in a way, but it doesn't mean that it was right. It doesn't mean that no evil occurred. So, just because a proportionate reason may exist does not justify the action. Just because a good enough reason exists does not give you a right to commit evil acts. And in the case of voting for a pro-abortion politician, the act of voting it's remote from the act of abortion because you're not actually carrying it out. Because the chain of choices that occur between your vote and this candidate promoting, legislating, signing, drafting, writing any law or policy that inevitably leads to an abortion, it's remote. So what is the thing is, though, there's only one circumstance where it is okay to vote for someone who, or it is valid to vote for someone who is pro-abortion or pro-euthanasia. And if you're a Catholic, and and you're discerning whether or not you're going to vote for someone who is in favor of either of these, please listen, because it's the only time it's possible. So suppose that there are two candidates, right? There's a candidate A, and their only policy, again, hypothetical, only policy is that they support abortion. But candidate B, they support abortion and euthanasia. Well, more harm will be done to society by candidate B, and so as a Catholic, you must cast your vote in such a way that will limit the harm done to society. And in this situation, if you were to vote for candidate A, it doesn't endorse his policies, his or her policies, but it acts as an attempt to kind of rein in the greater evil that will result otherwise. And honestly, voting, you'll never, ever vote for someone that you agree 100% on every single thing that they say. And in fact, you might oppose all of a candidate's policies and vote for him or her just to keep a worse candidate out of office. So it's more a statement of, given the options available, I want this candidate to be elected this time. And, so this was the case with voting for candidate A to prevent the election of the even worse candidate B, because both policies were evil, but one was more evil than the other. However, as Catholics, if we are Catholic and we want to vote for someone who is in favor of abortion, someone who does not want to outright illegalize abortion, someone who just wants to kind of reduce the numbers, not eliminate, we can only do so if we can find counterbalancing reasons that are proportionate to abortion. So what kind of a reason could we do, or could we go with? Well, let's consider. So according to the Guttmacher Institute, and that's the former research branch of Planned Parenthood, there's one abortion performed every 96 seconds. And pharmaceutical scientists, they've projected that chemical abortions, so like using the abortion pill or abortifacient, birth control pills, they account for 14 million abortions in the U.S. each year. So over 610 million chemical abortions have taken place since these methods were kind of available, so around 1965. So 610 million chemical abortions, so using the pill or birth control. And a candidate running for just a 4-year term, let's say they only do 4 years, if they are pro-choice, they could extend this holocaust of lives, adding on up to 56 million chemical abortions and up to 6 million surgical abortions. So they would be responsible for those lives if that candidate were to themselves, if they're congressional, senatorial, etc., vote for a pro-choice option. They would be responsible for that. Now, more than 2,000 deaths have had transpired on 9/11, 2001. The terrorist attacks is over 2,000. But we would need 2,015 more 9/11 events, events of that magnitude, to reach the number of deaths caused by just the 6 million surgical abortions. So terrorism, it cannot be seen as an equal issue, as an equal evil to abortion. Or to some other ones. The American Immigration Lawyers Association, according to them, we would need 750,000 times the number of immigrant deaths from, I believe it was in 2018, there were 8 immigrant deaths, and horrid, absolutely horrid that happened. But we would need that times 750,000 for immigration policies of any kind from any office to be proportionate to the issue of abortion. Because unnecessary deaths are always evil, but as the USCCB stated, all issues do not carry the same moral weight. And the moral obligation to oppose policies promoting intrinsically evil acts has a special claim on our consciences and our actions. And other intrinsically evil acts that they talk about, they include assisted suicide, genocide, targeting civilians during war, providing inhumane conditions to workers, things like that. So don't listen to anyone who says that other issues are, even when combined, are more evil or more important than the millions of deaths caused by abortions. Because until they can give you numbers that are equal to, if not greater than, lives taken by abortion, they're wrong. Then they're misguided. They're just wrong at that point. Another thing, because earlier, I'm going to go back to this. I was saying, what about, a Catholic politician of any kind, and Catholic specifically, a Catholic politician of any kind, what's their obligation? Well, Pope John the 23rd said that their duty is to safeguard the inviolable rights of the human person and to facilitate the performance of his duties. And that is the principal duty of every public authority. Now, if you pass a law, or you help a law get through that protects unborn children from abortion, you're not imposing your faith on people any more than if a Catholic politician were to, say, pass a law against, lynching, or a law against, rape in a marriage, marital rape. That's not imposing your faith. That's imposing common sense morals. But I do want to say, because, can Catholics vote? Can you vote third party? Well, some people, they say that Catholics, you cannot vote for a third party because you have an obligation to vote for the candidate who will be most likely to prevent the most evil. Now, the Catechism, it says that submission to authority and co-responsibility for the common good make it morally obligatory to pay taxes and to exercise the right to vote. So Catholics have a general obligation to vote to promote the common good of society, but the Church leaves us discretion to determine how to do so. So priority, not voting for anyone who is pro-choice in any regard. And then, second, if you want to go third party, go for it. Because, maybe you don't agree with the second option, because they're also pro-choice, let's say. And then you can vote for third party, yes. Now, just to summarize, here's some rules for Catholic voters. Summarize everything I've said. First, Catholics must never promote or directly vote for propositions or laws whose goal is to maintain or increase access to abortion. Voting with the intention that you want abortions to remain or continue, as Catholic, you cannot do that, says your church. Pope John Paul, again, he said that in the case of an intrinsically unjust law, such as a law permitting abortion or euthanasia, it is never okay to obey it or to take part in a propaganda campaign in favor of such a law or vote for it. Rule number 2, Catholics must never vote for a politician because of that politician's support for abortion. So, to vote for someone specifically because you like their views on abortion, that is to commit a grave sin, and you will not be in communion with the Church. The third most important rule, that Catholics may not Catholics may not vote for a candidate who supports abortion just because they agree with the candidate on less important issues. Because remember, the intrinsically evil acts: abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, genocide, etc. But whoever is elected to any position of power, we always have to keep in mind 1 Timothy chapter 2. Because we have to remember that supplications, prayers, petitions, and thanksgivings be offered for everyone, for kings and for all in authority, so that we may lead a quiet and tranquil life in all devotion and dignity. This is good and pleasing to God our Savior, who wills everyone to be saved and to come to knowledge of the truth. So, there you go. That is the Catholic Church's teaching on voting as a Catholic. Now, as I do with my episodes, I'm going to just a couple general questions you could use, and of course take any of the statistics that I may have brought. If you'd like any sources, leave a comment. I have plenty of sources that I can share. And people who know me know that I do not like using biased sources. I don't like, or at least not rooted in the magisterium of the Church. So if unless something is, what am I trying to say? Basically, I look at every side of everything. I make sure that sources are as unbiased as possible. Now, so some questions you can ask. Did you know that many people have found hope and healing after abortion using programs like Project Rachel, which was established by our church, the Catholic Church, not the Quad-Parishes, to serve all people regardless of religious affiliation. So Project Rachel, it's a wonderful post-abortion resource, and you can tell people about that. Another question, as people like to claim that Catholics don't care about a mother or child once the baby is born, We can say, well, why does Catholic Charities, the organization, why do they help over 15 million individuals each year and have over 3,000 offices? Because they offer housing services, food pantries, hot meals, grocery boxes, money for utilities, money for rent, clothing, toys, diapers, medical aid, immigration and refugee services, employment services, and adoption and pregnancy assistance. So, no, we very, very much care. Now, as always, check out the resources I have listed below if you're presumably checking this out on YouTube. And again, thank you. Also, my special note to any women who are listening who have dealt with or may deal with in the future an abortion. You are loved and you are welcomed. I pray for everyone who's taken the time to listen, but especially women who have dealt with such trauma, especially if you didn't know about other options. I am sorry. I am sorry, but guess what? Here at the Quad-Parishes, you are welcome. If you're local, come on in. One weekend for Mass, just come on in. You don't have to talk to anyone. You can stand at the back and just watch and realize that you are loved by the staff here and by God. So, anyway, thank you to everyone, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.